That's right, welcome to Quick Stop F1. My name is Nyasha and you could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. We appreciate that. If you're watching this video, thank you. Much appreciated. Give it a like, subscribe to the channel. We're here every day with F1 content of some form. We've got a podcast, daily vids. I even dress up in a wig sometimes. Don't believe me? Go through our past videos. But today we are here to talk about one George Russell. And whilst it's not breaking news, I guess it is news of sorts in that over the weekend, Toto Wolff sort of confirms that George Russell will likely have a new contract by the summer break, which is obviously coming up after the Hungarian Grand Prix this weekend. And in all things considered, it brings to a close pretty much the biggest kind of silly season story that we've had this season, with Max Verstappen seemingly flirting with the idea of leaving Red Bull, but that seemingly, on top of that, getting knocked on the head with the departure of Christian Horner from Red Bull the other day. Ding dong, Horner's gone. Oh, still feels so good. But nevertheless, nevertheless, we're here to see just what that means for the F1 paddock. And let's start, I guess, with what this means for George Russell. George Russell gets a 2-year contract, and now I think the fashionable term these days is multi-year contract. But essentially, it just means a contract longer than 1 year. Sometimes it means 2, sometimes it means 3, sometimes it means 2 plus 1, sometimes it means 1 plus 1. We really don't know anymore how long everyone's contracts run for, as people try and keep it under wraps as much as possible. But the prevailing sentiment is that George Russell has got a 2-year contract extension. Now, I guess, what does that mean for George Russell? You would think one of the top drivers in F1, probably top 3-4 drivers on the grid right now in terms of form, pretty much carrying Mercedes on his back at the moment, although there's not, he's not really carried them that far. The car's not great at the moment, but nevertheless, he's doing what he needs to do in that car. And I guess for me, it would seem as if, on the face of it, is a 2-year contract, a slap in the face for someone who has come into the team. You spent 3 years at the team, now this is his 4th. You would expect someone, in the eyes of the media, the Hamilton Slayer came down on his dragon, slayed the king. Let's not get into that. But nevertheless, you'd think Mercedes would want to reward him with the security of a contract longer than 2 years. But maybe this is a good thing for George. Look, we don't know anything about the horizon over 2026, right? I mean, look, 2026, everything could change. Red Bull have been the dominant force of the ground effect era. That is obviously coming to a close now, with McLaren obviously already constructors champions and likely to retain that title and add drivers championship to that through Oscar Piastri or Lando Norris. Probably Oscar Piastri. But nevertheless, I guess what we can look at is, for all of that next year, it seems as if, by prevailing sentiment around the paddock, Mercedes are going to be the guys who are going to be in the lead in terms of the new engine regulations. And add to the fact that they're kind of scrapping ground effect, something that obviously Mercedes have struggled with over the years. You would think that all of that kind of taken into consideration, does that mean that Mercedes are in a prime position to move? So for George, if you've got the best car, you want the security that you're going to have that for as long as possible. But stranger things have happened in F1. Mercedes might not actually have the strongest car. Who knows? McLaren might have the strongest car. Ferrari might have the strongest car. And maybe being a free agent in 2027, a period of time where you're looking at potentially Hamilton's contract being up, Leclerc's contract being up. I think a couple of the McLaren boys, potentially their contracts are up around that point. Are we looking at, a silly season, in the 2026 season where we're looking at a lot of people moving around, and does it pay for George Russell to be flexible in where he needs to go? Maybe. So maybe a 2-year contract isn't too bad for George. But what does it mean for Mercedes? Now, of course, the original talk of Max coming to Mercedes was also that he would be replacing George. I think that was a prevailing sentiment. I think when you looked at the results before we went into Europe, Kimi Antonelli was absolutely smashing it. And the prevailing sentiment was Verstappen will come in. George is the one without a contract. He would, they would kick George out, and George would have to find shelter elsewhere. Now, although George was always quite adamant that he was not the one that was going to move on, does that mean that George is does that mean that Kimi though now is the one under pressure? George has signed his contract. Kimi has looked a shell of the driver that we saw around the start of the season, and he's actually failed to pick up a single point this season in the European phase of the season. A few DNFs in there, and obviously finished well outside the points in the bottom 25% last week in Belgium. So Mercedes have a problem on their hands. They've got George consistent, the one, whatever. But with Kimi, this guy was supposed to be the second coming of Christ. He was supposed to be, if George was the Kingslayer, Kimi was the young pretender, the young knight at the table who was supposed to take over from George in due course. They bigged him up. He's had a Netflix documentary. He's been built as this phenomenal talent. But that's not come to the fore this season. And look, it's difficult to stand out in Formula One and to prepare yourself and to be at the level required straight away. However, when you look at the performance of Isaac Hadjar in what is ostensibly looks like a really easy car to drive in the RB, but nevertheless, Isaac Hadjar has been far and away the best rookie on the grid this season, and it's not been Kimi Antonelli. And the longer this form goes on, despite the fact that he got a well-deserved podium earlier in the season, the longer this goes on, the more questions will be asked of Kimi Antonelli, and the more questions will be asked of Toto Wolff. Did he make the right decision? Did he rush Kimi into that seat? Was there another seat that he could have put Kimi into? Could he have kept him in F2 for another couple of years? There really was no rush to put Kimi into that seat. The only rush to put Kimi into that seat was Toto's, because he was sure that Kimi Antonelli was going to be a better performer in that Mercedes than Lewis Hamilton. And right now, that has not happened whatsoever. Too soon? Maybe not too soon? I guess we'll see in the future. But one thing's for sure, the person left out in the cold in all of this Mercedes hoopla is Max Verstappen. So, Max Verstappen is staying at Red Bull. I think we've all got the gist now. Horner's gone. Horner was the big issue. Jos Verstappen could not stop running his mouth about Christian Horner needing to leave the team. He has to go. And despite being moved to by Nico Rosberg, I think we've all seen quite clearly that Christian Horner leaving has been a good thing for Max Verstappen. And look, didn't affect his driving one bit as he cruised to a sprint victory in Belgium. But it now means that Max Verstappen, let's say, I think his contract also expires in 2027. There's no doubt in anyone's mind, if this Red Bull is not up to scratch, is not up to pace, in the first 2 years of the regulation, Max will be looking to leave. It is not beyond the realms of possibility, guys, that this Red Bull could be the 5th, 6th, 7th fastest car on the grid. They are making their own engines from scratch. the only teams I'm expecting to be behind, I'm expecting Red Bull to be in front of, are Cadillac and Audi. Every other team genuinely has more of a foothold within these regulations than Red Bull. That's not even taking away the fact that they've lost crucial members of staff across the season. Across the last few seasons, they've had an absolute brain drain of key talent going elsewhere and flourishing. It could be really, really sticky for Max. And as someone who enjoys Max floundering on the radio when things aren't going well, it could get... Look, as their fans continually like to point out in terms of Hamilton, and look, as a Hamilton fan, the performances are nowhere near where they were in terms of results, where they were in 2021, for example, right? Now, we've given every excuse under the sun. We're saying we're criers, we're excuse hunters, this, that, and the other. If Max Verstappen is in a car which is the 8th fastest car next season, which is quite likely, building their own engines from scratch. Christian Horner tried to go back to V10s. He's tried to delay the engines as long as possible. It could get very sticky for Max. But on the bright side, the good thing and the positive thing for Max is that essentially Mercedes might come back in for him in 2027. No matter how well George Russell may do. Maybe they've already kicked out Antonelli. But Toto's on record saying he doesn't mind pairing George Russell and Max Verstappen. I think Toto Wolff will not stop at anything until Max Verstappen is in that Mercedes. I think for Toto Wolff, Max Verstappen is the driver that got away, and he couldn't put him into that seat. He couldn't promise him a seat. Red Bull could promise him a seat, and that's where he started his ascension into the sport with Red Bull through their driver program, who essentially guaranteed him an F1 seat and essentially guaranteed him a top seat straight away after, midway through his second season. So what can you do with that? You wait. And in the words of Victor Gyökeres, I can't remember what he said. It's in his Instagram caption. I'll put it there. But something about the wait making it taste better. But anyway, that's how Toto will. So we've come full circle. And just because George Russell is safe in that seat for now, 2027, let's see what silly season has for us in a couple years. Well, that's it for now. Thank you so much. We've got loads of new subscribers. Say hello in the comments. I love replying to all of your comments. Remember, like the video, subscribe, all of them things. Love you guys. Remember, no matter what life throws at you, keep it on the black stuff. I'll see you tomorrow. Peace. Toodle pip. Goodbye.